He planned every detail to embarrass his failed ex at the company gala. But when three little girls in pink dresses ran up calling him Papa, his jaw dropped. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Manhattan's winter of 2009 seemed determined to break records for both snowfall and bitterness. Through the frosted windows of a Soho diner, Megan Collins watched snowflakes dance against the darkening afternoon sky, temporarily mesmerized by their silent descent. At 23, she had spent 18 months in New York, pursuing dreams far grander than her current reality of refilling coffee cups and dodging the wandering hands of Wall Street types who believed their generous tips entitled them to more than service with a smile. "Table 7's order is up, Megan," called Jorge from the kitchen, snapping her back to the present. She balanced the plates along her arm with practiced precision: 2 eggs Benedict, 1 avocado toast with salmon, and a $20 waffle that differed from the regular $8 version only by the addition of seasonal berries and the clientele it attracted. As she approached table 7, she recognized the group immediately. Sunday brunches brought the financial elite who discussed million-dollar deals over $15 mimosas. At the center sat Jeffrey Blackwood, 32, his cashmere sweater and understated Rolex whispering old money louder than others shouted new wealth. "The eggs Benedict?" she asked, though she already knew who had ordered what. "That would be me," Jeffrey replied, his blue eyes meeting hers with that particular intensity that had first drawn her in 8 months ago. "Everything looks delicious, as always." A younger associate smirked at the comment, catching the double meaning that colored Jeffrey's words. Megan maintained her professional smile, refusing to acknowledge the undercurrent that everyone at the table understood. She and Jeffrey were sleeping together, had been for months, and the power dynamic of their relationship was as clear as the hierarchy at his company, Blackwood Industries. "Enjoy your meal," she said, stepping back. "Just let me know if you need anything else." "Always," Jeffrey responded, his smile holding promises for later. 3 hours and dozens of tables later, Megan counted her tips in the back room. $234, a good day. With her technical programming certificate from community college in Columbus proving useless in a city that only respected Ivy League credentials, these tips were her lifeline. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jeffrey. "My place tonight? The regular one." The regular one meant his pied-à-terre in the Lower East Side, not his actual residence, a Park Avenue penthouse he kept for business commitments and family obligations. She had never been invited there, understanding implicitly that their relationship existed in a separate compartment of his life. That night, after her shift ended, Megan stood in the small bathroom of Jeffrey's Lower East Side apartment, staring at the plastic stick in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines appeared where she had prayed to see only one. She took a deep breath, then another. This was their 3rd night this week together in what had become their unofficial home. Surely that meant something. Jeffrey had whispered things about a future, about how special she was. She rehearsed the words silently. "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." Not, "I'm pregnant, what do we do?" That phrasing suggested a problem, and this wasn't a problem. This was unexpected, yes, but not unwelcome. At least, she hoped he would see it that way. In the kitchenette, she prepared his favorite pasta, the sauce simmering as she heard his key in the lock. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Something smells amazing," Jeffrey called, setting down his briefcase. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. "Though not as amazing as you." Dinner progressed with Jeffrey talking about market projections and his father's plans to eventually hand him the CEO position. Megan barely registered his words, nodding at appropriate intervals, the pregnancy test burning a hole in her pocket. "You're quiet tonight," he finally noticed, refilling his wine glass. "Rough shift?" "Jeffrey, I need to tell you something." Megan's voice was surprisingly steady as she reached into her pocket, placing the test on the table between them. The transformation was instant. His expression shifted from relaxed lover to calculating executive within seconds. The warmth in his eyes froze over, his posture straightened, and suddenly Megan felt as though she were sitting across from a stranger. "You're pregnant." Not a question, a clinical assessment. "Yes, I just found out today." Jeffrey set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "This wasn't in the plans, Megan. I know it's unexpected, but you know my life is public," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "My father is grooming me to take over as president. A pregnant waitress doesn't fit the image I need to project." Each word landed like a slap. Megan struggled to reconcile this cold stranger with the man who had whispered endearments against her skin just hours ago. I thought we had something real," she managed. "We had something pleasant," Jeffrey corrected, his tone reminiscent of how he might discuss an underperforming investment. "But you must understand the realities of my position." Outside, snow began to fall again, fat flakes illuminated by the streetlights. Inside, the temperature seemed to drop with each passing second. "Let me be direct about why this won't work." Jeffrey folded his hands on the table. "You lack the qualifications to be a Blackwood wife. No elite university education, no family connections, no social refinement. You were a temporary diversion, Megan. Pleasant, but not substantial." Tears burned behind her eyes, but Megan refused to let them fall. "So that's it? 8 months together, and I'm just a pleasant diversion?" Jeffrey sighed, as if her emotional response was an inconvenience. He reached for his immaculate leather wallet, removed several crisp bills, and counted them deliberately onto the table. $500, he said, pushing the money toward her. "For the problem. There's a discreet clinic in Brooklyn. My assistant can make the arrangements." Megan stared at the money, nausea rising in her throat. "I'm not terminating this pregnancy because it's inconvenient for your career." "Then what exactly is your plan?" His voice hardened. "Single motherhood while serving eggs Benedict? That child deserves better than a life of financial struggle." "This baby deserves parents who want it," Megan countered, finding strength in maternal instinct already forming. "I'm keeping it, with or without you." Something dangerous flashed across Jeffrey's features. "That would be unwise." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm being practical. You have 48 hours to vacate this apartment. Don't contact me again. My lawyers are instructed to treat any attempt at extortion with extreme seriousness." "Extortion?" Megan's voice rose. "I don't want your money. I thought I wanted your love, but clearly that was never real." 48 hours, Megan. I've been more than generous." He stood, straightening his custom shirt. "I have a breakfast meeting tomorrow. I won't be back until late. I expect your things to be gone by then." He left without another word, the door closing with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if he had slammed it. Megan sat motionless at the table, the pasta growing cold, the money untouched. Her hand moved to her still flat stomach. "It's just you and me now," she whispered. The next morning, after a sleepless night and a shift where she moved through her duties like a ghost, Megan returned to the apartment to pack her things. She had nowhere to go, but her pride wouldn't allow her to remain in a space where she was so clearly unwanted. She froze at the end of the hallway. Her belongings, clothes, books, the few personal items she had brought into his space, sat in cardboard boxes outside the door. The lock had been changed. A note was taped to the top box, along with an envelope. Megan's hands shook as she read, "Additional $300 for transportation. Return to Ohio. You'll never be anything more than a mediocre waitress who got lucky for a few months. A baby will only ensure you never escape mediocrity." Inside the envelope were 3 crisp $100 bills. Megan crumpled the note in her fist, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. The casual cruelty was more painful than she could have imagined. She had $840 in savings. With Jeffrey's unwanted money, she had just enough to go back to Columbus, back to where she started, only now pregnant and heartbroken. At the Greyhound station, morning sickness mingled with humiliation as she purchased a one-way ticket to Columbus. New York had been her dream, her escape from a small-town life that felt too constraining. Now she was returning with her tail between her legs, exactly as everyone had predicted when she left. As the bus pulled away from the terminal, Megan watched the Manhattan skyline recede through the window. Skyscrapers that had once represented possibility now loomed like monuments to rejection. The pregnancy nausea intensified, forcing her to close her eyes and breathe deeply. In those quiet moments, as the city that had promised so much faded behind her, a seed of determination took root alongside the growing life within her. This child, this rejection, would not define her. Somehow she would find a way to build a life that would make Jeffrey Blackwood's dismissal the greatest miscalculation of his privileged existence. Megan placed her hand protectively over her abdomen, unaware that she wasn't carrying just one life, but 3. "We'll be okay," she whispered, a promise to herself as much as to her unborn child. "We'll be more than okay." As the bus left Manhattan behind, Megan couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later she would return to this same city as one of the most powerful women in the tech world, poised to acquire the empire that Jeffrey so prized. The Greyhound bus rumbled into Columbus just as the winter sun was setting, casting long shadows across the terminal. Megan stepped down onto Ohio soil, one hand clutching her small suitcase, the other instinctively resting on her stomach. The familiar skyline felt both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of everything she'd tried to escape. She found a payphone and dialed with trembling fingers. 3 rings, then a familiar voice answered. "Mrs. Watkins? It's Megan Collins. I'm back in Columbus, and I could really use some help." 2 hours later, Megan sat at Mrs. Watkins' kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. Her former computer science teacher had picked her up without questions, her kind eyes noting Megan's disheveled appearance but saying nothing until they reached her modest bungalow. "I made a terrible mistake," Megan finally confessed, tears flowing freely. "I thought he loved me. I thought we were building something real." Mrs. Watkins reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Tell me everything, dear." The story poured out. Meeting Jeffrey at the diner, his charm, the whirlwind romance, the pregnancy, and finally, his cruel dismissal. With each word, the humiliation burned anew. "He said I'd never be anything but a mediocre waitress," Megan whispered, the words still raw. "That a baby would ensure I never escaped mediocrity." Mrs. Watkins' expression hardened. "That man doesn't know what he's talking about. I've taught hundreds of students, and few had your aptitude for programming. You're anything but mediocre, Megan Collins." "What am I going to do? I'm pregnant, unemployed, and homeless." "You'll stay here until you find your footing," Mrs. Watkins said firmly. "The spare room isn't much, but it's yours for as long as you need it." That night, lying in the narrow twin bed of her teacher's guest room, Megan stared at the ceiling. She'd come to New York with dreams of becoming someone important in the tech world. Instead, she'd become a cautionary tale. "We'll prove him wrong," she whispered to her unborn child. Somehow, the following weeks blurred together in a haze of morning sickness and job rejections. Each interview followed the same pattern: initial interest in her programming certificate, followed by poorly disguised concern when they noticed her condition. "We'll keep your resume on file," they'd say, eyes already moving toward the door. By her 4th month, Megan had secured a waitressing position at a family restaurant near the university and evening work as a data entry clerk for an insurance company. The combined income barely covered her contribution to Mrs. Watkins' household expenses and the mounting medical bills. Her regular checkup was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. Megan sat in the small examination room, prepared for the routine visit. The ultrasound technician ran the wand over her growing belly, her brow furrowing. "Is something wrong?" Megan asked, panic rising. "I need to get Dr. Patel," the technician said, hurrying out. The doctor entered moments later, took one look at the screen, and smiled. "Ms. Collins, have multiples run in your family?" "Multiples," Megan repeated, uncomprehending. "You're carrying triplets," Dr. Patel said, turning the screen toward her. "3 healthy babies." The room seemed to tilt. "3? That's not possible. I can barely support myself. How can I possibly—" "One step at a time," Dr. Patel said gently. "This explains your severe morning sickness and rapid weight gain. We'll need to monitor you more closely." That evening, Megan sat on a bench in the local park, trying to process the news. 3 babies, 3 mouths to feed, 3 college educations to save for, 3 of everything. The impossibility of it all threatened to crush her. An elderly man feeding pigeons nearby looked over. "You all right, miss?" "I just found out I'm having triplets," she said, the words still sounding unreal. He chuckled. "My sister had twins back in '52. Everyone thought she'd never manage, especially after her husband ran off. Raised those boys alone, worked 2 jobs. Both became doctors. How did she do it? One day at a time," he said simply, "and she wasn't afraid to accept help when offered." Megan returned to Mrs. Watkins with new resolve. When she shared the news about the triplets, her teacher hugged her tightly. "Life just got 3 times more challenging," Mrs. Watkins acknowledged, "but also 3 times more meaningful." By her 7th month, Megan's routine had become grueling. Mornings at the restaurant, her swollen feet aching as she balanced plates, ignoring the looks from customers clearly wondering why she was still working in her condition. Evenings hunched over a keyboard at Midwest Insurance Group, entering endless data while her babies kicked inside her. One particularly difficult night she felt lightheaded as she typed, the numbers blurring before her eyes. She nearly slumped over the keyboard when a voice called out, "Are you okay?" A man stood in the doorway, David Chen, the owner of the small software development firm that shared the office building. Megan had seen him in passing but never spoken to him. "Just tired," she managed, straightening up. "I'm fine." He approached cautiously. "You don't look fine. You look like you're about to faint." Before she could protest, he was examining her screen. "You're entering these financial reports?" Megan nodded, embarrassed. It was mindless work, far below the skills she'd learned in her programming courses. "There's an error in this code segment," he said suddenly, pointing to a window she had minimized. "I know," Megan replied automatically. "Line 38 needs a different parameter to properly sort the client data." David looked at her with surprise. "You code?" "I have a certificate in programming from Columbus Technical. Not that it's done me much good." He studied her for a moment. "How far along are you?" 7 months. Triplets." His eyebrows shot up. "And you're working 2 jobs?" "No choice." David seemed to make a decision. "I need someone to test applications and fix basic bugs. You could do it remotely from home. It pays better than data entry." Megan stared at him, waiting for the catch. "Why would you offer that to someone about to have 3 babies?" "Because you spotted an error in code you weren't even supposed to be working on," he said simply. "You have an eye for this." The opportunity felt like the first real break since returning to Columbus. With David's work, Megan could reduce her waitressing hours and still make ends meet. More importantly, she could keep her programming skills sharp. During her limited free time, Megan devoured programming tutorials and borrowed textbooks from the library. Between feedings and diaper changes, she would have precious minutes to study, determined to expand her knowledge. One evening, while resting her swollen ankles, Megan turned on the small television in Mrs. Watkins' living room. The CNBC logo flashed across the screen, followed by Jeffrey's face. He was being interviewed about his promotion to CEO of Blackwood Industries following his father's retirement. "The future of technology is about exclusive premium experiences," he was saying, his familiar blue eyes gleaming with confidence. "We're not interested in mass-market solutions. Blackwood serves the elite because excellence deserves exclusivity." The camera pulled back to reveal him in an impeccable suit, surrounded by admiring financial analysts. He looked untouchable, successful, while she sat in a borrowed robe, her body stretched to its limits, her future uncertain. Something hardened within Megan as she watched him. She reached for a notebook and pen and began writing by the dim light of the table lamp. "My precious daughters," she wrote, somehow certain she carried 3 girls. "One day I will show the world, and especially Jeffrey Blackwood, that he made the biggest mistake of his life. Not just by abandoning you, but by underestimating the woman who brings you into this world. I promise we will build something so extraordinary that he will drown in regret for his words." She paused, then added, "He called me mediocre. He said a baby would ensure I never escaped mediocrity. What he didn't realize is that by trying to break me, he created something unbreakable. You 3 will never know the sting of his rejection because we will be too busy creating our own legacy." The letter became her manifesto, a promise made in the quiet hours of the night. Every time doubt crept in, every time exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, Megan would read those words and find renewed purpose. 2 weeks later, she went into premature labor. The delivery was complicated, the medical team working frantically to ensure all 3 babies survived. When it was over, Megan lay exhausted in the hospital bed, Mrs. Watkins at her side. "They're beautiful," her teacher whispered as the nurses brought the tiny infants for their first meeting. "Have you chosen names?" Megan looked at the 3 identical faces, so small and perfect. "Abigail, Sophia, and Emma," she said, names she'd selected for their meanings: father's joy, wisdom, and whole. A silent rebuke to the father who had rejected them, and a promise of the qualities she would nurture in them. The first months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding cycles. Mrs. Watkins proved invaluable, stepping in whenever Megan reached her breaking point. David kept his word, sending programming work she could do during the rare, quiet moments when all 3 babies slept. As the girls reached 6 months, Megan's rented room had transformed. One half contained 3 cribs arranged in a semicircle, while the other featured a makeshift workstation assembled from second-hand computer parts David had helped her acquire. It was during a particularly difficult night, when Abigail was teething and the other 2 had caught colds, that inspiration struck. Between soothing cries and administering medicine, Megan began sketching an algorithm that would optimize data organization in mobile applications. For a week straight, she worked on her idea during the precious few hours when the triplets slept, refining and testing her concept. When she finally presented it to David via video chat, his initial silence terrified her. "Megan," he finally said, "do you realize what you've created? This could revolutionize how our apps handle background processes. Is it really that good? It's brilliant. I want to buy the algorithm and integrate it into our products." The conversation that followed changed everything. David arrived at her apartment the next day, meeting the triplets for the first time as they crawled across their playmat. "They're beautiful," he said, watching as Sophia methodically stacked blocks, like their mother's mind. He laid out his proposal: $85,000 for the algorithm and a minority partnership in his company. It was more money than Megan had ever imagined possessing. "This would change everything for us," she whispered, emotion tightening her throat. "It's just fair compensation for exceptional work," David replied. "And I suspect it's just the beginning for you, Megan." As she signed the contract with Emma balanced on her lap while David held the other 2 girls, Megan felt a surge of vindication. Jeffrey's voice echoed in her memory. "You'll never be anything more than a mediocre waitress." That night, after putting the triplets to sleep, Megan reopened the letter she had written months earlier. At the bottom, she added a new line. "Today, I took our first step toward proving him wrong. This is just the beginning." That night marked a turning point. While signing the contract that would transform her algorithm into a commercial product, Megan had no idea she was planting the seed of what would become, in less than a decade, one of the most innovative technology companies in the world. That night marked a turning point. While signing the contract that would transform her algorithm into a commercial product, Megan had no idea she was planting the seed of what would become, in less than a decade, one of the most innovative technology companies in the world. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The algorithm sale had been just the beginning. With the capital from that first success and her growing partnership with David Chen, Megan had moved the triplets from Mrs. Watkins's spare room to a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet Columbus neighborhood. The morning sun now streamed through large windows, illuminating a living space that reflected both practical motherhood and technological ambition. "Abigail, please explain to your sisters why we can't have ice cream for breakfast," Megan called from the kitchen, where she was preparing a balanced meal while simultaneously reviewing code on her tablet. "Because our brains need protein and complex carbohydrates to function optimally," 5-year-old Abigail explained with startling precision to her pouting sisters. "Ice cream has simple sugars that cause energy spikes followed by crashes." Megan smiled, setting plates of scrambled eggs and whole-grain toast before each of her daughters. At 5, the triplets were already showing distinct personalities, though they remained identical in appearance. Same chestnut hair, same piercing blue eyes that sometimes caught Megan off guard with their resemblance to Jeffrey. "If we consume protein in the morning, our neurotransmitters function better," Sophia added, her vocabulary incongruous with her tiny frame and the stuffed robot tucked under her arm. Emma, always the pragmatist, simply began eating. "If we finish quickly, can we work on our math puzzles before school?" Megan checked the time. 20 minutes for puzzles if you eat without dawdling. The morning routine had become a well-orchestrated symphony. Breakfast, educational activities, dressing in their school uniforms, and then the drive to Montessori school, where the girls thrived in an environment that encouraged their advanced abilities. "Mom, will you explain Boolean logic again tonight?" Sophia asked as Megan adjusted her collar at the school entrance. "Of course. Now give me a hug and have a wonderful day. Learn something amazing to share at dinner." Watching them walk into school, identical backpacks bobbing in unison, Megan felt the familiar surge of pride and fierce protectiveness. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night had been worth it for this. 3 confident, brilliant girls who had no idea they'd been born against all odds. At Chen Software Solutions, now expanded to 15 employees, Megan led the development team with the same precision she applied to motherhood. David had recognized her talent early, promoting her to senior developer within 2 years of her algorithm sale. "The client meeting went well," David announced, entering the conference room where Megan was reviewing code with 2 junior programmers. "They want the healthcare management system deployed by next quarter." "We can do it in half that time," Megan replied, not looking up from her screen. "I've restructured the database access protocols to improve response time by 40%. David smiled. "This is why you're my lead developer. How are the girls?" "Thriving. Sophia dismantled and reassembled my alarm clock yesterday. It now plays the Imperial March from Star Wars instead of beeping." Their comfortable professional rhythm had been a blessing, allowing Megan flexibility to balance work and motherhood. But during quiet moments, usually late at night when the girls were asleep, Megan worked on something that had nothing to do with Chen Software's projects. Her apartment walls, once bare, now displayed complex diagrams and flowcharts, the early architecture of a neural interface system she'd been conceptualizing since reading about experimental brain-computer interfaces 2 years earlier. "What if we could simplify the neural pathways?" she murmured to herself that night, adding notes to her diagrams while the girls slept in their shared bedroom. Current BCIs require extensive calibration for each user, but if we could create adaptive algorithms that learn from minimal input patterns. She worked until 3 in the morning, losing track of time until a small voice interrupted her concentration. "Mommy, are you making a brain machine?" Sophia stood in the doorway, clutching her robot plushie, her eyes wide with curiosity rather than sleepiness. Instead of shooing her back to bed or simplifying her explanation, Megan made a decision that reflected her parenting philosophy. "Come here, sweetheart. Yes, I'm trying to design a way for people's thoughts to control computers directly." She lifted Sophia onto her lap and pointed to the diagrams. "See these patterns? They represent electrical signals our brains produce when we think specific thoughts. Like coding, but with brain electricity instead of keyboard typing?" Megan kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Exactly. You understand perfectly. Could it help people who can't move their bodies but can still think?" The question, so insightful from a 5-year-old, made Megan's heart swell. "That's exactly why I'm working on it, to help people communicate when their bodies can't." Sophia studied the diagrams with intense concentration. "You should use colors for different thought patterns. Easier to see patterns that way." Megan stared at her daughter, momentarily speechless. "That's actually brilliant. Visual coding by color spectrum could help identify signal overlaps." The next morning, Megan's diagrams included color-coded neural pathways, a simple but elegant solution she might have overlooked without Sophia's childlike yet profound observation. The days fell into a pattern: mornings with the girls, days leading development at Chen Software, evenings of family time, and late nights working on her neural interface concept. The balance was precarious but sustainable, fueled by Megan's determination and the girls' remarkable adaptability. Then came the email that changed everything. "Microsoft is interested in acquiring Chen Software," David announced, bursting into Megan's office one Tuesday afternoon. "Their representatives want to see a demonstration of our healthcare management system next week." The office erupted into excited chaos. For a small Ohio software company, Microsoft's interest represented the ultimate validation. As the development team prepared feverishly for the presentation, Megan made a decision that would alter their trajectory. "David, I need to talk to you privately," she said the night before the Microsoft meeting, after everyone else had gone home. In her office, monitors still glowing with code, she revealed her secret project. "I've been developing a neural interface system for nearly 2 years. It's far beyond conceptual now. I have a working prototype." David's expression shifted from confusion to astonishment as she explained the technical details. "This is revolutionary, Megan, but why are you telling me now?" "Because I think we should show Microsoft this instead of the healthcare system. The market for simplified BCIs is exponentially larger and more transformative." "That's insane," David said, running a hand through his hair. "We've been preparing the healthcare presentation for weeks. This is completely untested in market conditions." "It's also unlike anything currently available," Megan countered. "Microsoft doesn't want to acquire us for incremental improvements to existing software. They want innovation that changes paradigms." David paced the small office, weighing the enormous risk against potential reward. "How confident are you that the prototype works?" In answer, Megan pulled out a sleek headband with subtle sensors embedded along its length. "Try it." Skeptically, David allowed her to position the device on his head. "Now what?" "Think about moving the cursor on that screen to the right," she instructed. His eyes widened as the cursor moved smoothly without any physical input. "That's impossible." "Not impossible, just the future." Megan smiled. "I call it the neural bridge." The night before the presentation, Megan barely slept. She checked her prototype repeatedly, ran diagnostics, and rehearsed her explanation until dawn broke. At home, she hugged her daughters extra tight before school. "Why are you squeezing us so hard?" Emma asked, practical as always. "Because today might change everything for us," Megan answered honestly. "You'll be amazing," Abigail said with absolute confidence. "You always are." At the Chen Software offices, the Microsoft representatives arrived punctually. 3 executives in expensive suits, carrying leather portfolios and expressions of polite interest. They expected to see a moderately improved healthcare management system from a small Midwestern company. What they got instead was a glimpse into the future. "Ladies and gentlemen," Megan began, standing before them in her best business attire, still off the rack but professionally tailored. "Instead of showing our healthcare manager, I'd like to present the Neural Bridge, an interface that democratizes brain-computer communication." The executives exchanged confused glances, clearly thrown by the deviation from the expected presentation. "Ms. Collins, we were under the impression," the lead executive began. "Please, just 5 minutes to demonstrate," Megan interrupted smoothly. "Then you can decide if you want to return to the original agenda." With that, she placed the sleek headband on her head and turned to face the large display screen. Without touching a keyboard or mouse, she began controlling a presentation, slides advancing, data points highlighting, and applications opening and closing through thought commands alone. "What you're witnessing is direct neural interfacing without surgical implantation," she explained as she manipulated complex data visualizations with her mind. "Current medical-grade BCIs cost hundreds of thousands and require invasive surgery. The Neural Bridge achieves 80% of that functionality at potentially 1/10 the cost, with zero invasiveness." The room fell completely silent. The executives leaned forward, expressions transforming from confusion to astonishment and finally to the hungry look of people recognizing an extraordinary opportunity. "The applications extend beyond medical uses," Megan continued, switching to a video of a paralyzed patient using an earlier prototype to communicate. "Accessibility, education, productivity, gaming, any field where the barrier between human intention and digital execution matters." When she removed the headband, the lead Microsoft executive stood immediately. "We need to make some calls. Can we use your conference room?" For 45 agonizing minutes, Megan and David waited while the executives conferred privately. When they emerged, their body language had changed completely. They moved with the eager energy of hunters who had spotted rare prey. "Ms. Collins, Mr. Chen," the lead executive began, "we came prepared to discuss acquiring your healthcare software for approximately $4 million. Megan's heart sank, assuming the dramatic shift in presentation had cost them the deal. "However," he continued, "we'd like to propose an alternative. $24 million for the Neural Bridge technology and exclusive licensing rights." The number hung in the air, almost too large to comprehend. David gripped the table edge to steady himself. "I'll need to review any agreement thoroughly," Megan replied, maintaining remarkable composure despite the adrenaline flooding her system, particularly regarding implementation ethics and accessibility requirements. As contracts were drafted over the following days, Megan realized something profound. The $24 million represented not just financial security, but independence, the ability to pursue her vision without compromise. "I'm leaving the company, David," she told him after the Microsoft deal was finalized. "It's time for me to build something of my own." Rather than surprise, David's face showed understanding. "I've been expecting this. You've outgrown us. What will you call your new venture?" "Collins Neural Solutions," she replied without hesitation. "Focused on making neural interfaces accessible to everyone who needs them, not just those who can afford premium prices." That evening, she sat the girls down for a family meeting. "Something big has happened," she explained, choosing words they could understand while never talking down to them. "The special brain computer I've been working on? A big company is buying it, which means we'll have money to move to a better house and I'll be starting my own company." "Like you're the boss of everything?" Abigail asked, eyes wide. "Exactly like that." "Will we still have time for Boolean logic lessons?" Sophia worried. "Even more time," Megan promised, "because my new company will make exactly what I want, exactly how I want it." Emma, always focused on practicalities, had only one question. "Can I have my own desk in your new company, for when I visit?" "All three of you will have desks," Megan laughed. "After all, Collins Neural Solutions is named after us." As she tucked them into bed that night, Megan remembered Jeffrey's cruel words from years ago. "You'll never be anything more than a mediocre waitress." The memory no longer stung. It felt distant and irrelevant to the woman she had become. When the Microsoft representative offered $24 million for the neural bridge technology that afternoon, Megan knew it was time to leave behind being an employee or minority partner. It was time to found her own empire. When the Microsoft representative offered $24 million for the neural bridge technology that afternoon, Megan knew it was time to leave behind being an employee or minority partner. It was time to found her own empire. 5 years passed in a blur of growth and transformation. The $24 million windfall from Microsoft had been just the beginning. Megan had invested it wisely, purchasing a comfortable 2-bedroom condominium in a safe Columbus neighborhood with excellent schools, and pouring the rest into founding Collins Neural Solutions. What began as a 3-person operation working out of a converted warehouse space had blossomed into a legitimate contender in the neural interface market. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of their home as Megan prepared breakfast, the smell of cinnamon French toast filling the kitchen. The triplets, now 10 years old, sat at the kitchen island, 3 identical faces framed by neatly trimmed chestnut hair, their blue eyes, Jeffrey's eyes, focused on different pursuits while waiting for their meal. "Mom, I've been thinking about your interface calibration issue," Abigail said, looking up from her tablet. "What if the system used machine learning to adapt to individual thought patterns instead of requiring manual calibration each time?" Megan smiled, sliding a plate in front of her. "That's exactly what our research team is working on this quarter. Great minds think alike." "I made something," Sophia announced, producing a small circuit board from her pocket. "It's a simplified neural response monitor. I used the old parts from your prototype." Megan examined the device with genuine admiration. "This is impressive engineering, Sophia. The signal pathway is elegantly designed." Emma, ever practical, was reviewing a spreadsheet. "Mom, I calculated our monthly expenses and compared them to the average family in our income bracket. We're 14% below average on non-essential spending, which is good for future investment potential." "Thank you, my little financial advisor," Megan laughed, kissing the top of Emma's head. "I'll review your analysis tonight." The triplets had transformed their dining area into a miniature think tank, each with her own specialized interests emerging. Abigail showed natural leadership and ethical consideration. Sophia possessed uncanny technical intuition, and Emma displayed remarkable analytical skills. They were extraordinary by any standard, but to Megan, they were simply her girls, brilliant, compassionate, and blissfully unaware of the painful circumstances of their birth. After breakfast, Megan drove them to the Montessori school where they had thrived since age 3. The tuition had once seemed an impossible luxury. Now it was an investment she could easily afford. As they climbed out of the car in their navy uniforms, Megan felt a surge of pride so intense it momentarily took her breath away. "I love you, girls. Learned something amazing today." "We always do," they responded in unison, a habit that still occasionally startled others but felt perfectly natural to their family. At the Collins Neural Solutions headquarters, Megan transitioned seamlessly from mother to CEO. The company occupied 2 floors of a modern office building, housing 57 employees dedicated to advancing neural interface technology. Her corner office featured a wall of windows and 3 small desks in the corner, one for each daughter when they visited after school. "Morning, Megan," called Carmen, her CFO and the first person she'd hired. "The Stanford researchers sent their feedback on the education prototype. They're impressed." Megan nodded, scanning the report on her tablet. "Schedule a call with them for tomorrow. I want to discuss implementing their suggestions about the learning curve metrics." The day proceeded with the organized chaos typical of a growing tech company: development meetings, investor calls, and problem-solving sessions. Megan moved through it all with confident authority, a far cry from the timid waitress who had once served brunch to Wall Street elites. Her wardrobe had upgraded from polyester uniforms to tailored business attire, though she still prioritized comfort over labels, saving the designer pieces for important presentations. At 3 o'clock, her alarm chimed. Time to leave for the girls' science exhibition. No matter how busy her schedule became, Megan never missed their important events. As CEO, she had structured the company culture to respect work-life balance, starting with her own example. "I'll be back for the 4:30 investor call," she told her assistant. "The presentation materials are ready on my desktop." The school auditorium buzzed with parents and students examining project displays. Megan spotted her daughter's project immediately, a comprehensive display on neural plasticity and learning acceleration, far beyond typical fifth-grade level work. Several teachers hovered nearby, clearly impressed. "Mom!" Abigail waved excitedly. "We won first place! Dr. Ramirez from Ohio State was judging, and he said our research methodology was undergraduate level." Megan hugged each girl in turn, their achievements feeling like personal victories. "I'm so proud of you all. This calls for celebration. Dinner at Chen's tonight?" The girls cheered. David Chen's family restaurant had become their special occasion spot, a connection to the past that had helped shape their future. Later that evening, after dinner and homework, Megan sat in her home office reviewing quarterly projections while the girls read in their rooms. A notification popped up on her screen, an invitation to speak at the National Neural Interface Conference in San Francisco, alongside pioneers in the field. 5 years ago, such recognition would have seemed impossible. Now it was simply another validation of her vision. She accepted the invitation, then opened a drawer containing a worn envelope. Inside was the letter she had written to her unborn daughters years ago, promising to prove Jeffrey wrong. She rarely revisited it anymore, but sometimes, in moments of achievement, she remembered the fuel that had initially fired her determination. The next morning brought a development that would accelerate their trajectory dramatically. Carmen burst into Megan's office waving a tablet. "Microsoft wants to meet again. They're interested in licensing the educational neural package we've been developing." Megan looked up from her screen. "The learning acceleration interface? It's still in beta testing. They've seen the preliminary results. Their educational division wants first rights when it's ready." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Microsoft sent their top educational technology executives, a stark contrast to the mid-level representatives who had purchased the neural bridge 5 years earlier. Collins Neural Solutions was no longer an unknown entity. They were recognized innovators. The night before the presentation, Megan worked late finalizing details. The girls had already gone to bed when she noticed Sophia standing in the doorway of her home office. "Mom, are you nervous about tomorrow?" Megan beckoned her daughter over. "A little. It's a big opportunity for the company." Sophia climbed onto her lap, though at 10 she was almost too big for it now. "I improved something on your prototype." She handed over what looked like a standard interface headband but with subtle modifications. "I rewired the temporal sensors to reduce interference by 18%. Megan examined the device, amazement washing over her. "Sophia, this is brilliant engineering. How did you figure this out?" "I noticed a pattern in the error reports. The signal noise had a consistent frequency that could be filtered." She shrugged as if it were obvious. Megan hugged her tightly. "This is exactly why I named the company Collins Neural Solutions, because the Collins women solve problems others don't even recognize." The Microsoft presentation the following day exceeded all expectations. The educational neural interface, enhanced by Sophia's modifications, demonstrated how students could absorb and retain information up to 40% more efficiently by optimizing neural pathways during learning. "The applications for special education alone are groundbreaking," enthused the head of Microsoft's educational division. "This could revolutionize how we approach learning differences." The licensing deal they offered was substantial, $18 million for 5 years of exclusive educational application rights. Megan, however, didn't accept immediately. "There's one non-negotiable condition," she stated firmly. Any school serving disadvantaged communities must receive the technology at cost. Education equality is a founding principle of Collins Neural Solutions. The executives exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this stipulation from a relatively small company negotiating with a tech giant. That would significantly impact potential profit margins, one objected. Megan remained unmoved. Then we'll find another partner whose values align with ours. Our technology exists to expand access, not restrict it to those who can afford premium prices. After a tense hour of negotiations, Microsoft conceded, adding a provision to subsidize implementation in Title I schools. When the contract was finally signed, Carmen whispered to Megan, "You just left millions on the table for principal." "And gained something more valuable. Integrity," Megan replied. "The girls are watching everything I do. What lesson would I teach them by prioritizing profit over purpose?" The Microsoft deal catapulted Collins Neural Solutions into a new echelon of the tech world. Within months, their staff doubled, necessitating a move to larger headquarters. The company valuation reached $100 million, then $200 million, attracting attention from venture capitalists eager to invest in the next phase of growth. One evening, as Megan reviewed expansion plans in her home office, a news alert caught her attention. The business channel was featuring a segment on tech's rising stars, and there on the screen was her own face, alongside a caption reading, "Megan Collins, Neural Interface Pioneer Revolutionizing Educational Technology." The segment highlighted her journey from founding Collins Neural Solutions to their breakthrough educational interface. What it couldn't mention, was the personal journey that had preceded it all. As the segment ended, another began about traditional tech powerhouses facing innovation challenges. The camera cut to Jeffrey Blackwood, now CEO of Blackwood Industries following his father's retirement, defending his company's conservative approach to shareholders. "At Blackwood, we believe in proven technologies with established market positions," he stated smoothly, though Megan could detect the defensiveness behind his polished veneer. "We're not chasing speculative trends." The analyst interviewing him pressed harder. "But Blackwood's market share has declined 12% while competitors embracing neural interface technologies are experiencing double-digit growth. Is there concern that the company is falling behind the innovation curve?" Jeffrey's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Quality over novelty has been the Blackwood way for generations. We'll continue to serve our premium market segment with excellence." Megan switched off the screen, a complex emotion washing over her. There was no satisfaction in seeing Jeffrey defensive, no vindication in his company's struggles. Somewhere along the way, proving him wrong had ceased to be her motivation. Building something meaningful had become its own reward. The following day, she presented her 3-year expansion plan to the board of directors. Collins Neural Solutions would open research centers in Boston and San Francisco, triple their development team, and launch an accessibility initiative providing subsidized neural interfaces to medical centers serving underinsured patients. "This is ambitious," noted one board member. "The capital requirements are substantial." "So are the potential returns, both financial and societal," Megan countered confidently. "Neural interface technology can fundamentally change how humans interact with technology and each other. We have an opportunity, and I believe a responsibility, to ensure that transformation is accessible to everyone, not just the privileged few." The board approved her plan unanimously. As she left the boardroom, Carmen fell into step beside her. "You know what this means? We're officially playing in the big leagues now." Megan smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. "And we're just getting started." That evening, as she helped the girls with an advanced coding project they'd designed themselves, Megan reflected on the journey. From a desperate single mother with triplets to the CEO of a company valued at $400 million in just 10 years. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been undeniably worth every struggle. As the girls collaborated on their project, displaying a natural synergy and brilliant problem-solving, Megan wondered if people would soon begin asking whether Jeffrey Blackwood, whose company was facing stagnation, was somehow related to the brilliant CEO who shared 3 daughters with his surname. As the girls collaborated on their project, displaying a natural synergy and brilliant problem-solving, Megan wondered if people would soon begin asking whether Jeffrey Blackwood, whose company was facing stagnation, was somehow related to the brilliant CEO who shared 3 daughters with his surname. The $24 million from Microsoft had been transformed into far more than financial security. It had become the foundation of Megan's vision. With the capital secured from selling Neural Bridge, she leased a modest office space in downtown Columbus, the first official headquarters of Collins Neural Solutions. The converted warehouse space, with its exposed brick walls and industrial ceiling, represented something profound, a blank canvas upon which she could build exactly what she had imagined. Megan stood in the empty space the day after signing the lease, her footsteps echoing. 3 small desks already sat in a corner, one purple, one blue, one green, ready for the days when the girls would visit after school. "What do you think?" she asked the triplets, now 8 years old, as they spun in circles on the smooth concrete floor. "It's gigantic!" Sophia exclaimed, her voice bouncing off the walls. "Can I help design the lab space?" Abigail asked, already mapping invisible boundaries with her small hands. Emma, ever practical, was counting ceiling fixtures. "We'll need 16 more lights for optimal working conditions." Megan watched them explore, marveling at how they absorbed and processed the world. At 8, they were already revealing their distinct personalities, though they remained identical in appearance. The building felt too large for the small team she planned to start with, but Megan had learned to build for the future, not just the present. Her first hire was Carmen Rodriguez, a brilliant CFO who had been underutilized at a larger corporation. When they met for coffee, Carmen studied Megan with curious intensity. "You're offering me a significant pay cut and equity in an unproven startup," she observed. "Why would I leave financial security for this risk?" Megan didn't oversell or make grandiose promises. Instead, she placed her prototype neural interface on the table. "Try it." 20 minutes later, after experiencing direct neural connection to digital systems, Carmen was drafting her resignation letter on her phone. "Traditional interface technology will be obsolete within a decade. I want to be part of what replaces it." The early days of Collins Neural Solutions established a pattern that would define the company culture. Megan arrived at 6 each morning to work uninterrupted before the girls woke, returned home to prepare them for school, then back to the office until school dismissal. Afternoons often found the triplets doing homework in their designated corner, while Megan and her growing team worked to refine neural interface technology. "Mommy, you forgot lunch again," Abigail announced one day, organizing the office supply cabinet with meticulous precision. Sophia looked up from the printer she was inexplicably disassembling. "The toner configuration is inefficient. I can fix it." Emma, meanwhile, had created a spreadsheet of office expenses. "We're spending too much on paper clips. I found a bulk supplier that's 17% cheaper." The small team quickly grew accustomed to the 3 identical girls who spoke like miniature adults and contributed in surprisingly meaningful ways. What began as an amusing quirk, bringing children to work, became recognized as a genuine asset. The girls asked questions adults had been conditioned not to ask, spotted patterns others missed, and approached problems without preconceived limitations. 18 months after founding, Collins Neural Solutions unveiled its first commercial product, a simplified neural interface for medical applications. Megan chose to debut it at a medical technology conference, believing healthcare professionals would immediately recognize its potential. The reality proved more challenging. Standing at their modest booth, Megan watched as attendees, predominantly male doctors and hospital administrators, passed by with barely a glance. The few who stopped listened skeptically to her explanation, eyes drifting to the larger established company's elaborate displays. "Non-invasive neural interfaces have been promised for years," one neurologist commented dismissively, What makes yours different from the vaporware others have pitched? Rather than becoming defensive, Megan simply offered the headset. Try it. By the conference's second day, word had spread. A small crowd gathered as Megan demonstrated how patients with limited mobility could use the device to control communication systems, environmental controls, even basic prosthetics, all at a fraction of the cost of existing solutions. Dr. Alan Shepard, a respected rehabilitation specialist, put the interface through rigorous testing before looking up with astonishment. This costs 1/10 of what we're currently using and works better. How is that possible? Because we designed it for accessibility first, not profit maximization, Megan replied. The conference marked their first major sale, a pilot program with 3 rehabilitation hospitals. It was modest by industry standards but represented validation of Megan's core philosophy. Neural technology should serve those who needed it most, not just those who could afford premium prices. Back in Columbus, the company expanded rapidly. Research and development teams grew, clinical trials began, and investors started circling with increasing interest. For Megan, the balancing act between motherhood and leadership intensified with each new obligation. The first major crisis struck without warning. A tech giant announced a neural interface system remarkably similar to their medical device, with patent filings that narrowly avoided infringement. Collins Neural Solutions stock, recently public through a small IPO, plummeted overnight. That evening, after putting on a brave face for her employees all day, Megan locked herself in the bathroom of her condo and finally allowed the tears to come. The weight of responsibility for her employees' livelihoods, for the patients who needed their technology for her daughter's future, felt crushing in that moment. A soft knock interrupted her breakdown. "Mom?" Emma's voice came through the door. The stock dropped 37% today, but market overreactions typically correct within 3 to 5 trading days if fundamentals remain strong. Megan wiped her eyes, amazed at her 8-year-old's financial awareness. "How do you know that?" "I've been studying market patterns," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "Don't worry, Mom. Your product is better because you care about people, not just money. The market will figure that out." That simple faith, expressed through Emma's analytical mind, gave Megan the strength to emerge from the bathroom, read bedtime stories as if nothing were wrong, and then work through the night on a strategy to weather the crisis. The following months proved Emma right. Clinical results demonstrated Collins Neural's superior accuracy and adaptability. The competitor's similar device suffered from usability issues and higher failure rates. By quarter's end, their stock had not only recovered but surpassed previous levels. As the company approached its 3rd anniversary, Megan faced another pivotal moment. A major venture capital firm expressed interest in a substantial investment, $50 million for 30% ownership. The influx of capital would accelerate research and expansion dramatically, but the strings attached became apparent during the final negotiation meeting. "We have concerns about leadership structure," said Richard Winthorpe, the lead investor, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "For a company of this caliber moving to the next level, perhaps you should consider hiring a CEO with more experience, someone who presents a more traditional profile to potential partners." The room fell silent. Megan felt Carmen stiffen beside her. "Traditional profile?" Megan repeated calmly. Winthorpe cleared his throat. "Someone with established industry relationships. Perhaps you might consider taking on a more technical role, focusing on what you do best." The implication hung heavy in the air. A male CEO would give the company credibility that Megan, as a woman and single mother, supposedly couldn't provide. Instead of responding verbally, Megan stood and walked to the prototype station. "Before we continue this discussion, I'd like to demonstrate exactly why I'm the right person to lead Collins Neural Solutions." For the next 15 minutes, she provided a masterclass in both the technical aspects and market vision of neural interface technology. She manipulated complex systems through the interface, explained quantum computing applications to neural mapping, and outlined their 5-year development roadmap with absolute authority. Her command of every aspect, from nanoscale engineering to global market strategy, left no room for question. Our next-generation interface reduces signal latency by 73%, while improving accuracy by 41%, she concluded. I designed both the hardware architecture and core algorithms personally, while raising 3 children and building this company from nothing. Now, Mr. Winthorpe, would you like to explain again why I should step aside for someone with a more traditional profile? The investor's expression had transformed from condescension to genuine respect. Ms. Collins, I misspoke earlier. Your technical expertise is extraordinary. And my leadership capabilities? Equally impressive. I withdraw my suggestion completely. The meeting concluded with revised terms, $50 million for 20%, with no management changes required. As the investors left, Carmen whispered, "That was magnificent." "It was necessary," Megan replied simply. That evening, sharing pizza with the girls to celebrate the investment, Abigail asked perceptively, "Did those men want you to let someone else be boss because you're a lady?" Megan considered how to answer truthfully without burdening her daughters with society's inequities too soon. Some people have outdated ideas about who can be a leader. My job was to show them those ideas are wrong. By being so awesome, they couldn't ignore it, Sophia added with a grin. Exactly. The venture capital investment transformed Collins Neural Solutions. They expanded to a proper corporate headquarters, hired specialized teams for different applications, and began development on consumer-oriented products alongside their medical technology. Megan insisted on maintaining their social impact initiatives, ensuring accessible versions of their technology reached those who needed it most regardless of ability to pay. As she drove home one evening, Megan passed a newsstand displaying Forbes magazine with the headline, "Neural Revolution, the company's reshaping how we connect." Collins Neural Solutions was featured prominently, with mention of their $400 million valuation. The article noted Megan's unusual path to tech leadership, describing her as perhaps the most unexpected success story in neural interface development. That night, after the girls were asleep, Megan allowed herself a moment of reflection. The journey from pregnant, abandoned waitress to CEO of a multi-million-dollar technology company had been improbable by any measure. Yet each challenge, each dismissal, each skeptical investor, each technical hurdle had only strengthened her resolve. She opened her laptop to review acquisition targets for their expanding medical division. A notification popped up, breaking business news about Blackwood Industries facing shareholder pressure due to innovation stagnation. The article mentioned Jeffrey specifically. CEO Blackwood's conservative approach has maintained profitability but sacrificed market share to more agile competitors. Megan closed the notification without reading further. Jeffrey Blackwood no longer defined her story. He was merely a footnote in her journey. Her focus remained on building something meaningful, not proving someone wrong. That meeting marked a turning point. 3 years later, the Collins Neural Solutions would be valued at $400 million, and people were beginning to question if Jeffrey Blackwood, whose company faced stagnation, was somehow related to the brilliant CEO who shared 3 daughters with his surname. That meeting marked a turning point. 3 years later, the Collins Neural Solutions would be valued at $400 million, and people were beginning to question if Jeffrey Blackwood, whose company faced stagnation, was somehow related to the brilliant CEO who shared 3 daughters with his surname. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Collins Neural Solutions had evolved from a promising startup into a technological powerhouse valued at $1.2 billion, occupying a gleaming headquarters in Columbus that served as both corporate center and innovation hub. Megan's vision of democratizing neural interface technology had expanded beyond medical applications into educational tools, accessibility solutions, and productivity enhancements that were transforming how humans interacted with technology. On a crisp autumn morning, Megan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her executive office, watching employees arrive for the day. At 38, she had grown into her role as CEO with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding it. The uncertain young waitress from Soho had been replaced by a woman whose name appeared regularly on lists of the most influential people in technology. "Mom, the helicopter will be here in 20 minutes." Abigail's voice came from the doorway. Megan turned to see her daughter, now 13, poised and self-assured, tablet in hand as she managed her own increasingly complex schedule. The triplets had grown into remarkably accomplished young teenagers, each developing distinct talents while maintaining the identical appearance that still occasionally confused new acquaintances. "Is your presentation ready for the ethics committee?" Megan asked, gathering her materials for their trip to MIT, where Abigail would be addressing faculty about responsible AI development. "I made some revisions last night. The section on predictive neural interfaces needed stronger boundary parameters." Abigail handed her mother a coffee. "Emma says we'll hit turbulence over Pennsylvania, so take the motion sickness tablets now." In the adjacent laboratory, Sophia was deep in conversation with two senior bioengineers, her hands moving animatedly as she explained modifications to a neural interface prototype. At 13, she had already contributed to 3 patents. Her innate understanding of how technology and biology could intersect earning her the respect of scientists decades her senior. "The biomaterial needs to be more responsive to subtle electrical variations," she was explaining. "I've developed a polymer that amplifies neural signals without increasing noise." The engineers, both with PhDs and years of experience, were taking notes on her suggestions. In the finance department, Emma sat beside Carmen, the CFO, analyzing quarterly projections with the focus of someone 3 times her age. Her gift for numbers had evolved into sophisticated financial modeling that had helped guide the company's expansion strategy. "If we shift these research allocations to the 3rd quarter instead of the 2nd, we'll optimize both tax benefits and development milestones," Emma pointed out, highlighting sections of her meticulously prepared spreadsheet. Carmen shook her head in amazement. "I have 2 finance degrees and 20 years of experience, and you just spotted something our entire team missed." Emma shrugged modestly. "Numbers tell stories if you listen carefully enough." That evening, after returning from MIT, where Abigail's presentation on ethical AI guardrails had received a standing ovation from computer science faculty, Megan gathered with the girls in their home theater for their traditional Friday movie night. Their house, a spacious modern home with a laboratory in the basement and a small astronomical observatory on the roof, reflected both their comfortable financial situation and the family's intellectual priorities. As they debated between documentaries, Abigail's preference, science fiction, Sophia's choice, or financial thrillers, Emma's suggestion, Megan marveled at the extraordinary young women her daughters were becoming. Their accomplishments were remarkable by any standard, but what made her proudest was their compassion, integrity, and the genuine bond they shared as sisters. "Before we start the movie," Megan said, "I wanted to talk to you about something." The girls immediately gave her their full attention, recognizing her serious tone. "You've asked about your biological father before, and I've always told you he chose not to be part of our lives. As you're getting older, I think it's fair to give you more context if you want it." The triplets exchanged glances, having one of their silent communications that Megan had long ago stopped trying to decode. "We know the basics," Abigail said carefully. "You met in New York when you were a waitress. He didn't want children. He left." "Did you love him?" Sophia asked, always interested in emotional dynamics. Megan considered the question. "I thought I did at the time. I was young and impressed by his world. But real love requires mutual respect, and that wasn't there." "Do you hate him for what he did?" This from Abigail, her sense of justice always acute. "No," Megan answered truthfully. "I don't waste energy on hatred. He gave us a gift without intending to, the chance to build something extraordinary together." Emma, practical as always, asked, "Is he still alive?" Would he want to meet us now that we're successful? Megan smiled at the directness of the question. He's alive and running his family's company. As for wanting to meet you, I can't speak to what he might want now. What matters is what you want. Does he know about us? Sophia wondered. Not specifically. Our company has become prominent enough that he may have seen mentions of me having triplet daughters, but I've never reached out to him, and he's never contacted me. The conversation continued into the night, the girls asking thoughtful questions without judgment or anger. Megan answered honestly, neither demonizing Jeffrey nor making excuses for his choices. The triplets processed the information with remarkable maturity, treating their biological father as an abstract concept rather than an emotional void. 2 weeks later, a photographer from Forbes arrived at Collins Neural Solutions headquarters for a feature titled "The Collins Heiresses, the Next Generation of Tech Innovators." The magazine had become interested in the triplets after Abigail's MIT presentation went viral and Sophia's bioengineering innovations caught attention in scientific circles. The photo shoot captured the 3 13-year-olds in the company's advanced research lab, each demonstrating her specialty. Abigail explaining ethical algorithms, Sophia manipulating a holographic representation of her neural interface enhancements, and Emma presenting financial growth models. Though identical in appearance, same chestnut hair, same striking blue eyes, same heart-shaped faces, their distinct personalities shone through in their expressions and body language. The resulting article featured prominently in the magazine's innovation issue. While most teenagers their age are navigating social media and high school dynamics, the Collins triplets are helping shape the future of neural technology. Under the mentorship of their mother, Megan Collins, who built a $2 billion empire as a single mother, these remarkable young women are already making their mark on the technological landscape. The article included a sidebar about Megan's journey. Collins's story reads like a modern fairy tale in reverse. Instead of being rescued by a prince, she rescued herself and built a kingdom. After founding Collins Neural Solutions with proceeds from her first major innovation sale, she raised her triplet daughters while growing the company into a leader in accessible neural interface technology. "Being a single mother taught me efficiency and purpose," Collins told Forbes. "When every minute matters, you become extraordinarily focused on what truly matters." In the sleek executive suite of Blackwood Industries in Manhattan, Jeffrey Blackwood sat behind his father's former desk, scanning the business headlines on his tablet. At 45, his once boyish good looks had hardened into the sharp features of middle age, lines of stress etching themselves around his eyes despite expensive skincare regimens. The company he had inherited was stable but stagnant, its once dominant position in technology eroding as more innovative competitors captured market share. His assistant had compiled the usual morning briefing of industry news, competitor updates, and market trends. Jeffrey scrolled through it with growing irritation. Another quarter of merely adequate performance, another innovative startup disrupting a space Blackwood should have dominated, another article questioning his leadership compared to his visionary father. Then he stopped, his finger hovering over the screen. The Forbes feature on Collins Neural Solutions caught his attention. Not unusual, as the company had become a significant player in neural interface technology, a field Blackwood had been slow to enter. But it was the accompanying photo that made his blood run cold. 3 young teenage girls stared back at him, their identical faces hauntingly familiar. The same blue eyes that looked back at him from the mirror every morning. The same distinctive cheekbones that had defined Blackwood men for generations. The same determined set of the jaw that appeared in every family portrait hanging in the Blackwood estate. "The Collins triplets," the caption read. "Abigail, Sophia, and Emma, daughters of Megan Collins, founder and CEO of Collins Neural Solutions." The name hit him like a physical blow. Megan Collins, the waitress from the Soho diner, the brief affair he'd ended when she became pregnant. The inconvenient entanglement he'd dismissed from his life with a handful of cash and cruel words. "Impossible," he whispered. enlarging the photo to study the girls' faces more closely. But the evidence was undeniable. The genetic markers of the Blackwood lineage were written clearly across their identical features. These were his daughters, 13 years old, which aligned perfectly with the timing of that long-forgotten relationship. Jeffrey began frantically searching for more information. Articles about Megan Collins appeared on his screen. Her rise from obscurity to technological pioneer, her innovations in accessible neural interfaces, her company's dramatic growth trajectory. Photos showed her transformation from the uncertain young woman he remembered to a confident, polished CEO whose company was now valued at $2 billion, a fraction of Blackwood Industries' worth, but growing at a rate that his company hadn't achieved in years. And everywhere, accompanying her at public events, speaking at conferences, even co-authoring research papers, were the triplets, his daughters. 3 brilliant young women whose existence he had never acknowledged, whose lives he had chosen not to be part of, whose potential he had dismissed before they were even born. On the television mounted on his office wall, a CNN financial analyst was discussing technology sector performance. While established players like Blackwood Industries continue to struggle with innovation stagnation, nimbler companies like Collins Neural Solutions are redefining the landscape with breakthrough approaches to human-computer interaction. Jeffrey muted the television, his mind racing. The young waitress he had discarded as mediocre had built an empire while raising 3 extraordinary daughters. The pregnancy he had treated as an inconvenience had produced 3 brilliant minds now making headlines for their achievements. The woman he had told would never escape mediocrity was being hailed as a visionary. He picked up his phone, then set it down again. What could he possibly say after 13 years? What right did he have to insert himself into their lives now, when he had so thoroughly rejected them before? Would Megan even take his call, or would she hang up at the sound of his voice? As Jeffrey stared at the photos of the daughters he had never known, a cold realization settled in his stomach. These young women carried his DNA, his family's legacy, but they bore another man's name. The Collins women were building a future that might very well overshadow the Blackwood legacy, and he had no one to blame but himself. While Jeffrey encarava as fotos das 3 adolescentes que inegavelmente carregavam o DNA Blackwood, não imaginava que em apenas 2 anos estaria face a face com a mulher que considerara medíocre, agora prestes a comprar a empresa que ele herdara de gerações de sua família. While Jeffrey stared at the photos of the 3 teenagers who undeniably carried Blackwood DNA, he couldn't imagine that in just 2 years he would be face-to-face with the woman he had considered mediocre, now poised to purchase the company he had inherited from generations of his family. The year was 2024. Spring sunshine streamed through the vast windows of Megan Collins' corner office at Collins Neural Solutions headquarters, illuminating the award-winning sustainable architecture that housed her $5.3 billion enterprise. Outside, the carefully landscaped campus buzzed with activity as over 2,700 employees went about their work developing the next generation of neural interface technology. Megan adjusted her Chanel blazer, a far cry from the polyester uniform she had worn while serving Eggs Benedict at that Soho diner 15 years ago. At 38, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something extraordinary through relentless determination. The subtle streaks of silver in her chestnut hair were the only visible markers of the stress that accompanied raising triplets while building a tech empire. "The presentation for the Global Innovation Summit is finalized," she said, reviewing the holographic display hovering over her desk. The summit in New York next week would gather the world's leading technology innovators, with Megan scheduled to deliver the closing keynote on democratizing neural interface technology. Carmen entered carrying a sealed folder marked Confidential Acquisition Analysis. "The report you requested," Carmen said, placing it on Megan's desk. "Our team completed the evaluation of potential acquisition targets." Megan opened the folder, her expression remaining neutral as she reviewed the contents. The top sheet featured a familiar logo, Blackwood Industries, alongside financial projections, technology assessment, and valuation metrics. Their value has fallen 45% in 3 years, Megan observed, scanning the numbers. Their neural technology division has solid engineering talent but lacks cohesive direction. Carmen leaned against the desk. "You know who's still CEO, right?" A momentary silence filled the room as Megan's eyes lingered on the report. 15 years ago, she had left New York on a Greyhound bus, pregnant and devastated by Jeffrey Blackwood's cruel dismissal. Now she was considering acquiring a division of his family's company. "This is business, not personal," Megan finally said, her voice measured. "Their engineers have talent, but the leadership lacks vision. The technology would integrate well with our accessibility initiatives." Carmen studied her friend's face, searching for signs of emotional involvement. "Are you sure this is purely strategic?" "The numbers speak for themselves," Megan replied, closing the folder. "Have legal prepare the preliminary documentation. We'll decide after the summit." Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Jeffrey Blackwood stood before the Blackwood Industries board, feeling the familiar weight of disapproval that had grown heavier with each underperforming quarter. "The first quarter results are disappointing," said Eleanor Hodges, the most senior board member and his father's longtime confidant. "Revenue is flat, R&D output is minimal, and market share continues to erode." Jeffrey straightened his Italian silk tie, a defensive gesture he'd developed over years of similar confrontations. "We're maintaining profitability while exploring strategic—" "We've heard this speech for 11 consecutive quarters," interrupted Thomas Welker, representing major institutional investors. "Your father built this company by pioneering technologies. You've been managing it like a cautious accountant afraid to take risks." The meeting deteriorated from there. By the time Jeffrey returned to his Park Avenue apartment, the spring evening had turned cool and unwelcoming. He poured himself 3 fingers of 30-year-old scotch and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the city that had once felt like his birthright. The board had given him an ultimatum: present a convincing innovation strategy at the upcoming Global Innovation Summit, or face a vote of no confidence. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same summit where Megan Collins would be a featured speaker. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Collins Neural Solutions expected to announce major expansion at Global Innovation Summit. The accompanying photo showed Megan with the triplets at a recent charity gala, the 3 15-year-old girls poised and articulate as they discussed their individual research projects with Nobel laureates. Jeffrey set down his glass harder than intended. The daughters he had never known were accomplishing more as teenagers than many adults achieved in a lifetime. The woman he had discarded was redefining an industry, and his own legacy, the company generations of Blackwoods had built, was slipping through his fingers. Back in Columbus, Megan helped the triplets pack for their first trip to New York. In their spacious home, Abigail meticulously organized her presentation materials for a side event at the summit, where she'd been invited to speak on ethical considerations in neural technology. "The Museum of Natural History has an excellent exhibit on evolutionary neurology," Abigail said, checking items off her list. "We should allocate at least 3 hours for a thorough visit." Sophia was more interested in the research facilities they would tour. Columbia's bioengineering lab just published that breakthrough on neural mesh interfaces. I've arranged a meeting with their lead researcher to discuss potential collaborations. Emma, predictably, had mapped out the financial district. "I've scheduled a tour of the stock exchange and meetings with 2 venture capital firms interested in my algorithmic trading model." Megan watched her daughters with quiet pride. At 15, they navigated the world with confidence and purpose, entirely unaware that they were returning to the city where their story began, where their biological father had deemed them an inconvenience and their mother mediocre. "New York is where you met our biological father, isn't it?" Emma asked suddenly, her intuition as sharp as ever. Megan nodded, never hiding the truth. "Yes, I was working as a waitress at a diner in Soho, dreaming of breaking into the tech world. Was it difficult? Sophia asked, being there with us afterward. I left immediately after we separated, Megan explained carefully. This will be my first time back since then. Are you nervous about returning? Abigail's perceptive eyes studied her mother's face. Megan smiled, touching her daughter's cheek. Not at all. I'm returning as a keynote speaker with 3 extraordinary daughters and a company valued at over $5 billion. It's not exactly how I left. The conversation shifted to their itinerary, the girls excitedly planning their exploration of the city that featured so prominently in their origin story without knowing the painful details. Later that evening, in her home office, Megan reviewed the acquisition documents her legal team had prepared. The potential purchase of Blackwood's neural technology division made perfect strategic sense. Undervalued assets, complementary intellectual property, established manufacturing infrastructure. Carmen's question echoed in her mind. Was this purely business, or was there a personal element to acquiring a piece of Jeffrey's company? Megan had long ago moved past the need for vindication. Her success wasn't built on proving Jeffrey wrong, but on creating something meaningful despite his cruelty. Yet there was a certain symmetry to the possibility that could not be denied. The man who had told her she would never be anything more than a mediocre waitress might soon watch her acquire a division of his family's company. The following morning, the Collins family boarded their private jet for the flight to New York. The aircraft, modest by billionaire standards but comfortable and efficient, represented another milestone in Megan's journey from that Greyhound bus 15 years ago. As they soared over the Midwest, Megan finalized her keynote presentation while Carmen reviewed acquisition strategies beside her. If we move forward with Blackwood, there are 2 approaches, Carmen explained quietly, mindful of the girls reading nearby. We could make a straightforward offer for the neural division or pursue a more aggressive strategy targeting their weakened position. Megan considered this, watching farmland give way to the Appalachian Mountains below. Let's prepare for both scenarios. I want to see how their presentation goes at the summit before deciding. Will it be strange? Carmen asked. Seeing him again after all this time? Probably, Megan admitted, but not in the way you might think. He's not the same man who intimidated me 15 years ago, and I'm certainly not the same woman. Across the cabin, the triplets were engrossed in their own preparations. Abigail practiced her presentation on ethical AI governance, Sophia sketched modifications to a neural interface design, and Emma analyzed market trends on her specialized tablet. Do you think people in New York will be impressed by what we've built in Columbus? Sophia asked, looking up from her designs. Megan smiled. New York doesn't have a monopoly on innovation anymore. Some of the most groundbreaking technologies now come from places like Columbus, Austin, and Boise. Still, Emma said pragmatically, conquering Wall Street would be satisfying from a narrative perspective. The comment, so characteristic of Emma's analytical mind, made Megan laugh. We're not going to conquer Wall Street, sweetheart. We're just sharing our vision for more accessible neural technology. Same thing, Emma shrugged. Disruption through democratization. As the jet approached New York airspace, Megan gazed out the window at the iconic skyline emerging through the clouds. The city that had once represented her greatest heartbreak now looked different. Not intimidating, but simply another market to transform with her vision. She thought briefly of Jeffrey, wondering if he knew she would be attending the summit, if he had connected the dots about the triplets, if he ever regretted his choices. Then she dismissed these thoughts as unproductive. The past was immutable. Only the future offered possibilities worth exploring. Mom, look, Abigail pointed excitedly as they descended. There's the Empire State Building and Central Park. The girls pressed their faces to the windows, experiencing their first glimpse of New York with the wonder only teenagers seeing a legendary city for the first time could express. Megan watched them, her heart full. These moments, their joy, their curiosity, their brilliance, were the true measure of her success, far more meaningful than company valuations or keynote invitations. As the plane touched down at Teterboro Airport, Meghan reviewed her schedule one final time. The summit would begin tomorrow, with Jeffrey scheduled to present Blackwood's innovation strategy in the morning session. Her own keynote would close the event the following evening. "Ready?" Carmen asked as they prepared to disembark. Meghan nodded, gathering her materials. 15 years ago, I left this city with nothing but uncertainty and heartbreak. Tomorrow, we return on our own terms. The private car whisked them into Manhattan, the girls chattering excitedly about the landmarks they recognized. As they approached their hotel, the Plaza, where the summit would be held, Meghan felt a strange sense of completion, as if a circle drawn long ago was finally closing. What she couldn't know was that across town, Jeffrey Blackwood was reviewing the summit attendee list, his blood running cold as he spotted her name among the featured speakers. What she couldn't anticipate was how seeing her again, successful, confident, accompanied by the daughters he had rejected, would shatter the carefully constructed narrative he had built around their brief relationship. While the jet of Collins Neural Solutions crossed the sky toward New York, two destinies were heading toward an inevitable collision: Jeffrey, struggling to save the legacy he had inherited, and Meghan, preparing to complete the journey that had begun 15 years earlier in the corridor of a Lower East Side apartment. While the jet of Collins Neural Solutions crossed the sky toward New York, two destinies were heading toward an inevitable collision: Jeffrey, struggling to save the legacy he had inherited, and Meghan, preparing to complete the journey that had begun 15 years earlier in the corridor of a Lower East Side apartment. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel had been transformed into a shrine to innovation, its ornate ceiling and crystal chandeliers contrasting with cutting-edge holographic displays and prototype showcases. Jeffrey Blackwood stood near the entrance, meticulously adjusting his Hermes tie while scanning the event program for the 100th time. His fingers froze mid-adjustment when he reached the final entry: Closing Keynote, The Accessible Future of Neural Technology by Meghan Collins, CEO, Collins Neural Solutions. His throat tightened. Though he had seen her name on the attendee list the previous day, seeing it printed as the summit's culminating speaker made it undeniably real. Somewhere in this hotel, perhaps even in this building at this moment, was the woman he had discarded 15 years ago with cruel efficiency. Jeffrey retreated to a quiet corner, pulling out his phone to search for more information about Meghan Collins. Though he had discovered her identity 2 years earlier through the Forbes article about her daughters, his daughters, he had deliberately avoided learning more, as if ignorance could absolve him of responsibility. Now that luxury was gone. Images filled his screen: Meghan delivering TED Talks on neural accessibility, Meghan receiving the Pioneer in Technology Award, Meghan standing confidently between world leaders at economic forums. In each photo, she radiated the assured presence of someone who had earned her position through brilliance and determination. Then came the photos that made his stomach clench. Meghan with the triplets at various ages, from toddlerhood through their current teenage years. The girls' development was documented across science fairs, chess tournaments, and most recently, academic conferences where they presented their own research. In every image, the Blackwood genes were unmistakable. The characteristic blue eyes, the defined cheekbones, the angular jaw that had defined his family for generations. The Collins triplets, daughters of tech pioneer Meghan Collins, have each established their own specialties. Abigail in ethical AI governance, Sophia in bioengineering interfaces, and Emma in predictive market algorithms. Jeffrey's thumb hovered over their faces. 15 years old, 3 daughters he had never known, carrying achievements that already rivaled many adults. 3 lives he had deemed inconvenient, now poised to shape the future of technology. A notification interrupted his spiraling thoughts. 15 minutes until his presentation. He pocketed his phone and straightened his posture, forcing himself back into the role of confident CEO. His company's future depended on today's announcement of a strategic pivot toward neural technologies. an area where Blackwood Industries had fallen dramatically behind more innovative competitors, like Collins Neural Solutions. The irony was not lost on him. The morning session proceeded with Jeffrey delivering a competent, if uninspiring, presentation on Blackwood's renewed innovation strategy. The tepid applause that followed contrasted sharply with the enthusiastic reception given to younger, hungrier competitors. As attendees filtered out for the mid-morning break, Jeffrey caught fragments of conversation. Blackwood's always playing catch-up now. Too conservative for too long. Collins is presenting tomorrow. That's the one to watch. He retreated to the refreshment area, nursing a coffee and his wounded pride when a sudden shift in the room's energy drew his attention. People were turning, conversations pausing, subtle movements realigning toward the entrance. Megan Collins had arrived. She entered the grand ballroom with quiet confidence, wearing a tailored white suit that somehow managed to be both authoritative and feminine. At 38, she was more beautiful than Jeffrey remembered. Not with the uncertain prettiness of the young waitress he had known, but with the magnetic presence of a woman who had battled her way to success on her own terms. But it was her companions that truly arrested his attention. 3 identical teenage girls, dressed in complementary business attire, moving with the self-assurance of young women who had been raised to believe in their unlimited potential. His daughters. The physical impact of seeing them in person rather than in photographs was immediate and visceral. Jeffrey gripped his coffee cup so tightly the lid popped off, hot liquid spilling over his hand. He barely registered the burn, transfixed by the quartet making their way across the room. For a brief, electric moment, Megan's eyes met his. There was no surprise in her gaze, no shock of recognition, only a fleeting acknowledgement, as if confirming something she had already anticipated, followed by complete professional indifference. She continued her conversation with the Microsoft CEO without missing a beat, navigating the room as if Jeffrey were merely another attendee, not the man who had once told her she would never be anything but a mediocre waitress. Throughout the day, Jeffrey found himself orbiting Megan and the triplets from a distance, unable to approach yet incapable of staying away. He watched as industry leaders sought out their opinions, as venture capitalists competed for a moment of their time, as conference attendees asked for photos with the Collins women. During the afternoon reception, Jeffrey strategically positioned himself near the refreshment table where Megan was engaged in conversation with several tech executives. He inserted himself into the group with practiced corporate smoothness. The acquisition of Neural Bridge was one of the best investments we've made in the last decade, the Microsoft CEO was saying. Megan, you've transformed an entire sector. Jeffrey extended his hand into the circle. Megan Collins, Jeffrey Blackwood, Blackwood Industries. Your work is impressive. A momentary silence fell over the group. Several executives who knew both their companies' histories exchanged subtle glances, sensing the undercurrent but unaware of its true nature. Megan's professional smile never wavered as she accepted his handshake with perfect composure. Mr. Blackwood, I'm familiar with your company. Her hand was warm and firm, the brief contact sending an unexpected jolt through Jeffrey's system, the physical confirmation that this accomplished woman was indeed the same person he had so callously discarded. In fact, she continued smoothly, my acquisition team was recently analyzing your neural technology assets. They appear to need new direction. The color drained from Jeffrey's face as the implications of her casual statement registered. Collins Neural Solutions was considering acquiring Blackwood technology. The tables had turned so completely it was almost dizzying. Perhaps we could discuss potential synergies, he managed, desperately trying to maintain his corporate facade. Perhaps, Megan replied non-committally. Allow me to introduce my daughters, Abigail, Sophia, and Emma. The 3 teenagers turned toward him with polite interest, offering professional handshakes and poised greetings. Standing this close, the resemblance was undeniable, not just to him but to generations of Blackwoods whose portraits hung in his family estate. The girls studied him with mild curiosity before returning their attention to the technology leaders they had been conversing with. They had no idea who he was. No idea that the man shaking their hands was the same one who had offered money to terminate their existence 15 years ago. Throughout the dinner that followed, Jeffrey found himself unable to focus on anything but Megan's table, where the triplets engaged effortlessly with Nobel laureates and tech visionaries. Emma discussed machine learning applications with Google's research director. Sophia explained neural interface modifications to Apple's chief scientist. Abigail debated ethical governance frameworks with the EU's technology commissioner. These were not just privileged children of success. They were intellectual forces in their own right, already carving their paths in the world that would soon be theirs to shape. When Megan took the stage for her keynote the following evening, the grand ballroom fell silent with anticipation. Her presentation on democratizing neural technology was masterful, technically precise yet accessible, visionary yet practical. She demonstrated how neural interfaces could transform education, healthcare, and communication without requiring elite access or extraordinary wealth. Technology that remains exclusive to the privileged few isn't innovation, it's luxury, she stated, her voice carrying clearly through the room. True innovation removes barriers rather than creating them. The audience interrupted her multiple times with spontaneous applause, each instance driving home to Jeffrey how thoroughly she had surpassed him in vision and execution. While Blackwood Industries had focused on premium experiences for elite customers, Collins Neural Solutions had reimagined how neural technology could serve humanity broadly. Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the room. I'm proud to announce that Collins Neural Solutions is acquiring Blackwood Industries' neural technology division for $1.2 billion, integrating their infrastructure into our accessible systems ecosystem. Murmurs rippled across the ballroom. Jeffrey sat perfectly still, the blood rushing from his face. The acquisition had been negotiated directly with his board, the final details apparently approved without his full knowledge, a testament to how little confidence remained in his leadership. As attendees filtered out after Megan's standing ovation, Jeffrey intercepted her in a less crowded corridor. "You planned this," he accused in a harsh whisper. 15 years to execute your revenge." Megan regarded him with unsettling serenity. "No, Jeffrey. 15 years building something meaningful. The acquisition is purely strategic. Your engineers have talent, but your leadership lacks vision." "Those girls, they're my daughters." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "Biologically, yes," Megan acknowledged calmly. "In every other aspect that matters, no. They have my surname, my values, and a brilliant future I've built for them. I have a right to know them," Jeffrey insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Right?" Megan's soft laugh held no humor. "You surrendered any rights when you left my belongings in the hallway and told me I would never be anything more than a mediocre waitress. Your exact words, which I've never forgotten." Before Jeffrey could respond, Abigail approached them, tablet in hand. "Mom, the CEO of Neuralink wants to discuss collaboration opportunities," she said, then glanced curiously at Jeffrey. "You're from Blackwood, correct? I read about the acquisition. I hope your engineers adapt well to our culture of accessible innovation." When Abigail walked away, Jeffrey looked utterly devastated. "They don't know who I am. They know their biological father chose not to be part of our lives," Megan replied evenly. "I never needed to demonize you. Your actions spoke for themselves." While Jeffrey remained frozen in place, Megan rejoined the celebration of her keynote success, welcomed by a crowd of admirers and industry leaders. The triplets moved through the room with confident grace, their futures unfolding brilliantly before them. While Jeffrey stood there watching Megan and the daughters he'd never known command the room, the full magnitude of what he had lost 15 years ago finally crushed down upon him. Not just the family he might have had, but the visionary partner who could have transformed his company instead of building her own empire in response to his cruelty. While Jeffrey stood there watching Megan and the daughters he'd never known command the room, The full magnitude of what he had lost 15 years ago finally crushed down upon him. Not just the family he might have had, but the visionary partner who could have transformed his company instead of building her own empire in response to his cruelty. The morning after the summit brought brilliant sunshine to Manhattan, illuminating a city that seemed to have awakened to a new technological reality. Headlines dominated every digital display and news outlet. Collins Neural Solutions acquires Blackwood's neural division for $1. $2 billion, and neural pioneer Megan Collins consolidates market position. Jeffrey sat on the edge of his hotel bed, still in his wrinkled dress shirt from the night before, watching Megan's interview on CNBC with haunted eyes. The anchor asked about the challenges of being a single mother in the competitive tech world. "It was the best decision I ever made," Megan responded with a serene smile that reached her eyes. "My daughters taught me perseverance. When you're responsible for 3 lives beyond your own, there's no room for giving up." She looked radiant in the morning light filtering through the studio windows, her success sitting on her shoulders like a perfectly tailored garment. Jeffrey ran his hand over his own face, feeling the stubble and exhaustion of a sleepless night. "Your journey from single motherhood to building a $5 or $3 billion company is remarkable," the interviewer continued. "Were there moments when you considered giving up?" A soft laugh escaped Megan. "Every day for the first few years. But then I'd look at my daughters and remember that their future depended on my resilience. Failure wasn't an option." Jeffrey switched off the television, unable to bear the contrast between her fulfilled life and his increasingly hollow one. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from board members demanding an emergency meeting to discuss the implications of yesterday's announcement. At Blackwood Industries headquarters, the atmosphere was funereal. Board members and executives gathered in the mahogany-paneled conference room where generations of Blackwoods had charted the company's course. Today, that legacy hung by a thread. "This acquisition wasn't properly vetted through appropriate channels," Jeffrey began, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Eleanor Hodges, the senior board member, cut him off with a raised hand. "The board approved this sale after extensive review. Your leadership has been questioned for years, Jeffrey. This acquisition merely highlighted the innovation stagnation you've overseen. Collins Neural Solutions is implementing technologies we should have pioneered," added Thomas Welker. "Their valuation has increased 8-fold in 5 years while ours has declined. The neural division sale was a necessary strategic decision." "Without my knowledge," Jeffrey countered, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "You were informed of negotiations," Eleanor replied coldly. "Your apparent shock last night suggests you either weren't paying attention or chose to ignore the implications. Neither scenario inspires confidence." The meeting deteriorated from there, with various board members outlining concerns about Jeffrey's leadership style, his resistance to innovation, and his apparent disconnection from market realities. When the formal vote of no confidence was suggested, Jeffrey realized he was fighting a losing battle. "We're not removing you as CEO today," Eleanor concluded, "but consider this a final warning. The next quarterly results must show significant improvement, or changes will be necessary." As the board members filed out, leaving Jeffrey alone in the conference room his grandfather had built, the weight of failure pressed down on him. He had inherited a technological pioneer and transformed it into a cautious follower, while Megan Collins, the waitress he had dismissed as mediocre, had built something revolutionary from nothing. Across town at the Plaza Hotel, Megan prepared for her departure press conference. The acquisition had generated enormous interest, with technology analysts hailing it as the consolidation move of the year. Her suite buzzed with activity as her team finalized details while the triplets prepared for their afternoon activities. "The integration team will begin assessment next week," Carmen reported, reviewing schedules on her tablet. "Initial projections suggest we can implement our accessibility protocols across their product line within 6 months." Megan nodded, adjusting her earrings, simple platinum studs that complemented her navy suit. Ensure the transition package for their engineers is generous. I want their best minds excited about our vision, not resentful about the acquisition. Already done. The retention bonuses are substantial. A knock at the door interrupted them. When her assistant opened it, she returned with a message. Jeffrey Blackwood is in the lobby asking to speak with you. A momentary silence fell over the room. Carmen raised an eyebrow. Want me to have security escort him out? Megan considered this, then shook her head. No, I'll meet him before the press conference. It's better to address whatever this is now rather than let it fester. In the hotel lobby, Jeffrey paced anxiously, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. His custom suit, though expensive, hung slightly askew, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. When Megan approached, he straightened instinctively, a reflex from years of board meetings and media appearances. 5 minutes, Jeffrey, Megan said by way of greeting. The press is waiting. He gestured toward a quiet corner of the lobby. Please. They sat on an elegant settee, worlds apart despite the small physical distance between them. Jeffrey's hands fidgeted with his watch, a nervous habit Megan had forgotten until this moment. I never imagined this, he began, his voice lower than intended. You, building all this, the girls. What did you imagine? Megan asked, her tone professionally neutral. That I'd remain a waitress forever? That a baby, 3 babies as it turned out, would ensure I never escaped mediocrity? Jeffrey flinched at hearing his own cruel words reflected back at him. I was wrong. Yes, you were. Did you plan this? He asked, an edge of desperation in his voice. The acquisition? Was it revenge 15 years in the making? Megan studied him, noting how time had hardened his once boyish features. Not everything is about you, Jeffrey. The acquisition makes perfect business sense. Your neural division has excellent foundational technology that's been criminally underutilized because your leadership can't see beyond immediate profit margins. The board is questioning my position. That's hardly surprising. Your company has been innovative adjacent for years, watching others pioneer while you perfect minor iterations of existing technologies. Jeffrey leaned forward, lowering his voice. I want to meet them properly. The girls. They're my daughters, too. Biology doesn't equal parenthood, Megan replied, her calm exterior betraying none of the protective fury that surged beneath. You made your choice 15 years ago when you called them a problem and offered me $500 to solve it. People change, I've changed. Perhaps, but my priority is protecting them, not facilitating your midlife crisis of conscience. Before Jeffrey could respond, Megan's phone chimed with a reminder. The press conference begins in 10 minutes. I need to go. As she stood, Jeffrey reached for her arm. Please, Megan, I'm begging you for a chance. She looked pointedly at his hand until he released her. My daughters are exceptional young women with brilliant minds and compassionate hearts. They've achieved more by 15 than most adults do in a lifetime. That happened not because of you, but despite you. At least tell them who I am, he pleaded. They know what matters, that their biological father chose not to be in their lives. Beyond that, it's their decision if they want to know more. With that, Megan walked away, her posture straight, her stride confident. The press conference proceeded flawlessly. Megan outlined how the acquisition would accelerate their mission of making neural interface technology accessible to diverse populations, particularly those with medical needs. Reporters peppered her with questions about integration plans, market strategy, and competitive positioning. Then came the personal question she had anticipated. Ms. Collins, as a single mother who built this empire while raising triplets, what message do you have for other women facing similar challenges? Megan smiled, genuinely this time. That limitations are often illusions. When someone tells you what you can't achieve, let that become the fuel for proving what you can. My daughters watched me build this company from nothing, and that experience shaped them more profoundly than any lecture about perseverance ever could. In the rear of the conference room, Jeffrey stood silently, those words landing like physical blows. He had been the one to tell her what she couldn't achieve, and now she stood before the world's press, living proof of his monumental misjudgment. As the event concluded, Meghan was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and media requests. Jeffrey slipped out unnoticed, returning to his now silent office at Blackwood headquarters. On his desk sat the morning's Wall Street Journal, its headline a stark reminder of his failure. Meghan Collins, from adversity to $5, $3 billion empire. The article mentioned in passing her journey as a single mother of triplets while building her company. A small photo showed Meghan with the girls at a recent charity event, their matching smiles a testament to the strong family unit they had formed without him. Jeffrey opened his bottom desk drawer and removed an envelope. Inside was a legally prepared document acknowledging paternity of Abigail, Sophia, and Emma Collins, along with details of substantial trust funds he had established for each. He had carried it with him to the summit, uncertain if or when he might find the courage to present it. The following morning, as Meghan and the triplets prepared to return to California, Jeffrey waited in the plaza lobby. When he spotted them checking out, he approached with measured steps, the envelope clutched in his hand. "Meghan," he said quietly, "a moment, please." She turned, her expression guarded but not hostile. The triplets stood nearby, engaged in conversation with the hotel concierge about their transportation to the airport. "Please," he repeated, "just give me a chance to know them." "That isn't my decision, Jeffrey," Meghan replied evenly. "They're 15 years old. They're independent people with their own opinions. If they ever want to know you, I won't stand in their way." "Will you tell them who I am?" "They already know the essentials. A man who wasn't ready to be a father. What they do with that information is up to them." Jeffrey extended the envelope. "My lawyer prepared this. It's a formal acknowledgement of paternity and a substantial trust fund for each of them." Meghan looked at the envelope without touching it. "They have company shares worth hundreds of millions each. They don't need your money. And as for acknowledgement, 15 years later, it's an empty gesture." The triplets approached, ready to depart. Jeffrey watched them, seeing reflections of himself and generations of Blackwoods in their faces. "Girls," Meghan said calmly, "this is Jeffrey Blackwood." The three studied him with educated interest. Emma, always perceptive, was the first to make the connection. "You're our biological father," she stated matter-of-factly. Jeffrey nodded, words momentarily failing him. "Interesting," Emma continued analytically. "Your company developed fascinating neural algorithms, though they've been commercially underutilized. I hope our team can implement them more efficiently." There was no anger in her voice, only cool professional assessment. Sophia, the most empathetic of the three, asked, "Do you have other children?" "No," Jeffrey answered. "I never married." "That must have been lonely," she observed with surprising compassion, before turning to her mother. "Is our flight confirmed?" Abigail remained silent, studying the man who had contributed to her existence. Finally, she spoke. "Thank you for the introduction. If you wish to continue this conversation in the future, you can contact my assistant." She handed him a business card printed with Abigail Collins, Director of Ethics in AI, Collins Neural Solutions. As the four women walked toward the waiting car, Jeffrey stood motionless, holding the business card as if it were a priceless artifact. Through the hotel's revolving doors, he watched them depart. Meghan and the three extraordinary daughters she had raised alone, heading back to the empire they had built without him. While the press celebrated Meghan's acquisition as a brilliant strategic move, Jeffrey understood a deeper truth. This moment represented not just a business transaction but the completion of a journey that began 15 years ago when he had cast aside a pregnant waitress with cruel words and a handful of cash. The most profound loss in Jeffrey Blackwood's life hadn't been the neural technology division of his company. It had been the family he'd never known. While the press celebrated Meghan's acquisition as a brilliant strategic move, Jeffrey understood a deeper truth. This moment represented not just a business transaction but the completion of a journey that began 15 years ago when he had cast aside a pregnant waitress with cruel words and a handful of cash. The most profound loss in Jeffrey Blackwood's life hadn't been the neural technology division of his company. It had been the family he'd never known. The morning after the Global Innovation Summit dominated financial news across every platform. The Wall Street Journal published an extensive profile, Megan Collins, From Adversity to $5, $3 billion Empire. The feature delicately mentioned her journey as a single mother, noting how she had balanced raising triplets with building one of the most innovative companies in neural technology. Jeffrey sat in his hotel suite, still dressed in yesterday's rumpled shirt, watching Megan's interview on CNBC with hollow eyes. The anchor asked about the challenges of motherhood in the competitive tech landscape. "It was the best decision I ever made," Megan answered, her composure radiating through the screen. When you're responsible for 3 lives beyond your own, you develop a different kind of perseverance. There's simply no room for giving up. She looked vibrant in the morning light, her success sitting naturally on her shoulders, while Jeffrey felt the weight of failure crushing his. He ran a hand over his unshaven face, the contrast between them now so stark it was physically painful to witness. "Your daughters are quite remarkable," the interviewer continued. "All 3 presenting at MIT before they turned 15. How did you nurture such extraordinary minds while building your company?" Megan smiled warmly. "Children rise to the expectations we set. I never treated them as limitations on my ambitions but as inspirations for them. They watched me work through challenges, solve problems, and refuse to accept artificial barriers. Those lessons shaped them more profoundly than any lecture ever could." Jeffrey switched off the television, unable to bear another moment. His phone vibrated incessantly with messages from board members demanding an emergency meeting. The subject line left no room for interpretation. Immediate discussion of leadership transition. At Blackwood Industries headquarters, the atmosphere in the boardroom felt like a funeral where the deceased was still awkwardly present. Board members sat stiffly around the mahogany table where generations of Blackwoods had guided the company's direction. Today, that legacy hung by a thread. "This acquisition blindsided our shareholders," Jeffrey began, attempting to seize narrative control. Eleanor Hodges, his father's trusted advisor and the board's most senior member, cut him off with a sharp gesture. "The board approved this sale after extensive analysis. Your apparent shock merely confirms what we've suspected for years. You've become dangerously disconnected from this company's operations." Collins Neural Solutions is implementing technologies we conceptualized years ago, Thomas Welker added. "While you've been protecting profit margins on legacy products, they've been revolutionizing the entire ecosystem." Jeffrey straightened his tie, a defensive gesture that fooled no one. "My conservative approach maintained profitability during economic downturns that destroyed more aggressive competitors, and left us irrelevant in a market we once defined," Eleanor countered. "Your father built this company by embracing calculated risks. You've spent a decade avoiding them altogether." The meeting descended into a clinical dissection of Jeffrey's leadership failures. Each board member methodically outlined concerns about his resistance to innovation, his disconnection from market evolution, and his inability to inspire the creative teams that had once been Blackwood's greatest asset. "We're not removing you today," Eleanor concluded after 2 brutal hours. "But consider this your final opportunity. Next quarter's results must demonstrate significant strategic realignment, or we'll be forced to consider alternatives." As the board members filed out, Jeffrey remained alone in the conference room his grandfather had built, surrounded by portraits of Blackwood patriarchs who had each expanded the company's reach. He alone had presided over its contraction. Across Manhattan at the Plaza Hotel, Megan's suite bustled with activity as her team prepared for their return to California. The acquisition had generated enormous interest, with technology analysts already speculating about how Collins' neural solutions would transform Blackwood's underutilized assets. Integration teams will begin assessment next week, Carmen reported, reviewing schedules. Initial projections suggest we can implement our accessibility protocols across their product line within 6 months. Megan nodded, adjusting her simple platinum earrings. Ensure the transition package for their engineers is generous. I want their best minds excited about our vision, not resentful about the acquisition. A quiet knock interrupted them. When her assistant returned, she carried an unexpected message. Jeffrey Blackwood is in the lobby asking to speak with you. Carmen raised an eyebrow. Security can handle this. Megan considered this briefly, then shook her head. No, I'll meet him before the press conference. Better to address whatever this is directly. In the hotel lobby, Jeffrey paced anxiously, his usually immaculate appearance showing clear signs of distress. When Megan approached, he straightened instinctively, corporate muscle memory engaging despite his emotional turmoil. 5 minutes, Jeffrey, Megan said, her tone businesslike. I have a press conference scheduled. They moved to a quiet corner, sitting across from each other like strangers negotiating a transaction, which in many ways they were. I never imagined this outcome, Jeffrey began, his voice strained. You, building an empire. The girls. What did you imagine? Megan asked evenly. That I'd remain forever the waitress you dismissed? That your children would ensure I never escaped mediocrity? Jeffrey flinched visibly at hearing his cruel words reflected back. I was wrong about everything. Yes, you were. Was the acquisition revenge? He asked, leaning forward. 15 years planning to take apart what my family built? Megan studied him, noting how the years had hardened his once boyish features into sharp angles of stress and ambition. Not everything revolves around you, Jeffrey. Your neural division has excellent foundational technology that's been criminally underutilized. It's a strategic acquisition, nothing more. The board is questioning my leadership. That's hardly surprising. Your company has been standing still while the rest of us move forward. Jeffrey lowered his voice, almost pleading now. I want to meet them properly. The girls. They're my daughters too. Biology isn't parenthood, Megan replied, her calm exterior concealing fierce protective instincts. You made your choice when you called them a problem and offered cash to solve it. People change. I've changed. Perhaps, but my priority is protecting them, not facilitating your midlife crisis of conscience. Before Jeffrey could respond, Megan's phone chimed. The press conference begins in 10 minutes. I need to go. As she stood, Jeffrey reached for her arm. Please, I'm begging you for a chance. She looked pointedly at his hand until he released her. My daughters are exceptional young women with brilliant minds and compassionate hearts. They've achieved more by 15 than most adults do in a lifetime. That happened not because of you, but despite you. The press conference proceeded flawlessly, with Megan outlining how the acquisition would accelerate their mission of democratizing neural interface technology. When a reporter asked about her journey as a single mother building a tech empire, her response left no room for self-pity. When someone tells you what you can't achieve, let that become fuel for proving what you can, she said, her words landing like arrows in Jeffrey's chest as he watched from the back of the room. Limitations are often just illusions created by other people's lack of imagination. The following morning, as Megan and the triplets prepared to return to California, Jeffrey waited in the plaza lobby, clutching an envelope. When he spotted them checking out, he approached with measured steps. Megan, he said quietly, 1 moment, please. She turned, her expression guarded but not hostile. The triplets stood nearby, discussing their flight details with the concierge. Please, he repeated, just give me a chance to know them. That isn't my decision, Jeffrey, Megan replied evenly. They're 15 years old. They're independent people with their own opinions. If they ever want to know you, I won't stand in their way. Will you tell them who I am? They already know the essentials, A man who wasn't ready to be a father. What they do with that information is up to them. Jeffrey extended the envelope. My lawyer prepared this. It's a formal acknowledgement of paternity and a substantial trust fund for each of them. Megan looked at the envelope without touching it. They have company shares worth hundreds of millions each. They don't need your money. And as for acknowledgement, 15 years later, it's an empty gesture. The triplets approached, ready to depart. Jeffrey watched them, seeing unmistakable reflections of his family lineage in their features. Girls, Megan said calmly, this is Jeffrey Blackwood. The three studied him with educated interest. Emma, always perceptive, was the first to make the connection. You're our biological father, she stated matter-of-factly. Jeffrey nodded, momentarily speechless. Interesting, Emma continued analytically. Your company developed fascinating neural algorithms, though they've been commercially underutilized. I hope our team can implement them more efficiently. There was no anger in her voice, only cool, professional assessment. Sophia, the most empathetic of the three, asked, Do you have other children? No, Jeffrey answered. I never married. That must have been lonely, she observed with surprising compassion before turning to her mother. Is our flight confirmed? Abigail remained silent longest, studying the man who had contributed to her existence. Finally, she spoke. Thank you for the introduction. If you wish to continue this conversation in the future, you can contact my assistant. She handed him a business card printed with Abigail Collins, Director of Ethics in AI, Collins Neural Solutions. As the four women walked toward their waiting car, Jeffrey stood motionless, holding the business card as if it were a precious artifact. Through the hotel's revolving doors, he watched them depart. Megan and the three extraordinary daughters she had raised alone, heading back to the empire they had built without him. Weeks later, at her expansive home in Atherton, California, Megan hosted a dinner for her board of directors, celebrating the successful integration of Blackwood engineers into the Collins Neural Solutions team. The acquisition had already yielded promising results, with several innovative projects accelerated by the combined expertise. News from New York had reached her through industry channels. Jeffrey had been sidelined to a non-executive position on the Blackwood board, maintaining only a seat at the table of the company his great-grandfather had founded. The irony wasn't lost on her, though she took no particular satisfaction in his professional decline. Emma entered Megan's home office, balancing complex equations on her tablet. I received an email from him. He wants to know if we could have lunch when I'm in New York for the Applied Mathematics Conference. What did you answer? Megan asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. That my schedule is fully booked, but I could find 15 minutes for coffee. Emma smiled with the particular wisdom that had always seemed beyond her years. I thought it was fair. He lost 15 years. He gained 15 minutes. Megan embraced her daughter, amazed as always by her clarity. You don't need to establish that equivalence. If you want to know him better, that's your right. Mom, Emma said thoughtfully, I understand that part of my DNA comes from him, but everything that matters, my values, my ethics, my determination, came from you. I'm curious about him, not yearning for him. That evening, watching her three brilliant daughters engage confidently with global technology leaders in her home, Megan felt a profound peace settle over her. Revenge had never been her goal, only living so fully that the abandonment became irrelevant. In New York, Jeffrey stared out his Park Avenue apartment window, the city lights blurring as he contemplated his diminished future. On his desk lay 3 detailed files about Abigail, Sophia, and Emma Collins' accomplishments, prepared by his staff. Beside them, a photo of the 3 extraordinary young women who carried his genes but built their character under the guidance of the woman he had considered insufficient. The empire he could have shared, the family he never knew, the legacy Megan had built while his disintegrated. 15 years ago, he had dismissed Megan Collins as irrelevant to his future. Now she was the future, and he was merely a footnote in the extraordinary story she had written despite him, not to prove him wrong, but because she had always been capable of far more than he had ever imagined. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.